What are some ridiculous history facts? Ancient Romans would put sandals on the hands of sleeping people then tickle their face, so they would slap themselves. Etchu, brute. Fun fact, this is where the idea of stiletto heels came from. If you're interested to know, high heels were made for butchers, so they didn't step in blood. Not sure when or where it started, but yay. Fun fact lol. Edit for those commenting, I googled it. Yes, they were used by 15th century Persians for riding, but also used by ancient Egyptian butchers to avoid blood. Why would they need just high heels to avoid blood? Getting toe soaked is cool. Claudius Drusus died in AD 20 from asphyxiation when he tossed a pear in the air and caught it in his mouth. The pear tree was put on trial, found guilty of murder, and destroyed. 2 important questions. How large was this man's throat? How small was this pear? It might not be true. Suetonius tells us this story and he lived more than 50 years after Claudius Drusus died. It's also totally possible that he was actually murdered by a man named Sejanus, who was a pretty notorious figure in the early empire. We will probably never know what really happened to him. A lot of high-profile deaths surrounding the royal family, for lack of a better term, from around this time, that have wacky stories behind them, or at least there are suspicions, and there were suspicions at the time, that their deaths weren't entirely natural. Heirs to the throne under Augustus and Tiberius had a habit of dying young. The Spartans never built a city wall, figuring that their reputation alone would mean no one would dare attack them. But, during the Persian War, the Persians, who had already burned Athens twice, hired a Greek guide to take them to Sparta. But when they got there, they saw a kinda crap looking city without even a wall. They figured there was no way this place could be the mighty Sparta they had heard so much about. So they figured the Greek was lying, and thus Sparta was spared. Edit, I'm remembering this from reading it in the book Persian Fire by Tom Holland. It's quite possible that I'm misremembering details, or that Holland's text identifies this as a legend or story. Still, the book is a fantastic read, and I heartily recommend it. This is Sparta. Now that the popularity of this thread has died down, I just wanted to thank all those that gilded my comments. Much appreciated. No, this is madness. This is not Sparta. This is Patrick. This is how we do it. The first bomb dropped on Berlin by the British during WW2 claimed no human casualties, but it did kill an elephant. Never forget, there were 9 elephanta in Berlin Zoo at the start of WW2. At the end of the war, there was only one left. Its name was Siam. The Battle of Bull Run, during the American Civil War, was called the Picnic Battle because so many civilians from Washington went on picnics on the sidelines and watched. But once the battle actually started, and the Union started to get its ass kicked, they all ran away, running over injured soldiers and dead bodies, and generally disrupting the battle. This was actually a relatively common thing during the Civil War. I know it happened at Gettysburg too. Think tourist. War tourism is big business. It also happened at the Battle of Watling Street in the year 61. The Iceni were so confident they would defeat the Romans, they gathered round in their wagons to watch. When they were routed and had to fall back, the wagons blocked their path, and that's how Boudicca was defeated. I thought the wagon thing was pretty standard for Celtic migratory war parties. Families stand behind the lines, so that the warriors know retreat isn't an option. A Chinese emperor escaped an assassin by running around a pillar. After 2 hours, the assassin got bored and went home, and wasn't charged for his crimes. Just imagine. 20 minutes in, the assassin knows he looks ridiculous running around the same pillar this whole time, but he's kind of committed at this point. Besides, how much stamina could an emperor have, anyway? 40 minutes in, the assassin is wondering how much time an emperor has for CrossFit each week. An hour in, the assassin still running in circles trying to catch the emperor, all the while thinking this is so stupid, this is so goddamn stupid. He is beginning to wonder if he was given this mission as a prank. 90 minutes in, the assassin knows with horrible certainty that, whether he succeeds or fails, he's going to be the laughingstock of the whole empire. 2 hours in, both he and the emperor are still wheezing their way around the pillar. The assassin is not only tired and completely humiliated, but also realizes that he's in no shape to be able to run away after the assassination now, and figures his best bet is to give up and hope the emperor sees the humor in the whole situation. Meanwhile, the emperor is sitting quietly on the top of the pillar, eating ramen and watching the assassin running around and around chasing the tail end of his own cloak. The Bugs Bunny School of Combat. He actually didn't get away. Jing, the assassin, failed in the attempt. The emperor ran around the pillar until he had an opportunity to draw his sword out of his extraordinarily large and unpractical robes to then injure the leg of Jing. After this, the emperor got enough distance to Jing so that the guards could imprison him. There was a no weapon near the emperor policy, so the guards didn't dare to come closer to rescue him. Edit. Thanks for this correction. Apparently there wasn't a 2-hour chase around a pillar. I'm yet to find out what was instead. Also, we got a bear. In mind this was 200 BC. The sources are probably a little blurry when it comes to accuracy, although Wikipedia does seemingly look quite detailed on this topic. At US President Andrew Jackson's funeral in 1845, his pet parrot had to be removed because it was swearing. Edit. Lots of interest. Looks like someone went ahead and birthed a subreddit that's dedicated to TR stories. Join us over at r/TR stories for more. There are a few pretty common stories about Theodore Roosevelt that get circulated on Reddit fairly regularly. Over the past few years, I've become, in some ways, addicted with the 26th president and his more than fascinating life. To the chagrin of all my family and friends, I've taken it upon myself to read as much as I possibly can about the man and share some of the lesser known stories with them. So here are some of my favorite. Also, currently at work, so these are mostly from memory. Also, sorry for posting the same story twice, writing in a Google Doc then copying it over, so work doesn't think I'm diddling on Reddit all day. Other TR enthusiasts, please let me know if anything's wrong and I'll update. One more. Not many people knew about his relationship with the Emperor of the Badlands Antoni Amedee Mary Vincent Manca Vallombrosa, the Marquis de Moors, a Frenchman who wanted to gain the throne in France and was raising money by doing all sorts of schemes in the Dakotas. He nearly challenged TR to a duel, and TR confined to his friend that he would have chosen long rifles at 7 paces because the Marquis was a better duelist. The Marquis quickly backed off because the long rifle at 7 paces would put the barrel against each of their chests. While also in the Badlands, his boat was stolen, and he famously tracked the robbers down after a harrowing 3 days on the nearly frozen Little Missouri River. Once he found these men, he disarmed them and captured them. They were a known group and wanted all around the country. Now TR could have hung them on the spot, but he insisted they get proper justice and instead carted them 150 miles to the nearest town. During this trek, he became friends with the bandit leader and exchanged books and thoughts on the books the men had. TR stayed awake, watching the men for nearly 4 days straight, and returned them to the proper authorities. He received $50 and was technically a bounty hunter. I can't remember exactly, but I don't think any of them were hung. He would also read a book a day while president, and could memorize entire passages and pages. This was amazingly helpful, because he would plan a meeting, read about the subject, and become an expert on the matter almost overnight. Edit. People are asking for more. So here's one more. While exploring the River of Doubt, a completely ludicrous adventure in itself, TR contracted malaria and had a high fever for a few days. Prior in the expedition, TR made everyone promise that if anyone was sick or injured that they wouldn't jeopardize the safety of the rest of the group and leave them behind. Well, No one could justify leaving TR behind, so they carried him along. At one point, he became so sick that he began deliriously repeating this line over and over again for days. In Xanadu, did Kubla Khan, a stately pleasure dome decree. It was the opening line to a poem, where the next line read, where Alf the sacred river ran, through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. This is from memory. I'm on mobile, so it might not be perfect. I have a bunch more, if people are interested. The Library of Congress recently released his presidential trove of letters. TR wrote over 250,000 letters, and none of these are transposed. I've been going through, finding the coolest ones, transcribing them, and recording them. I've discovered some awesome stories after reading nearly 7,000 of them. Here's a funny one, where Roosevelt is criticizing President Wilson for not fighting in WWI. Edit one last one. You guys are making my day. It's literally my favorite hobby to drink a beer and tell these stories. TR had a really great relationship with Booker Washington, a southern black professor, who TR invited to the White House and became the first black man to ever dine there. TR, as you can imagine, got a lot of backlash for this, and Washington sent a clipping from the Baltimore Herald that recounted a true story of his, Washington's, encounter with her elderly Southern colonel. It went as follows. "Sup, I'm glad to meet you," the colonel said. "Always wanted to shake your hand, sup. I think, sup, you're the greatest man in America." Washington modestly replied that he thought President Roosevelt was the greatest man in America. "No sup," roared the old man. "Not by a jugful. I used to think so, but since he invited you to dinner, I think he's a scoundrel." Roosevelt was vastly amused by this story and stated, "I think that is one of the most delightful things I have ever read. It is almost too good to be true." Edit someone birthed a subreddit. Come join us at r/Twitter stories for more. Sure. I have literally hundreds of stories I've read about him. Also, sorry at work trying to not look like I'm on Reddit all day. The audit might have gotten screwed up with all my edits. Theodore Roosevelt rarely let his fighting spirit get the best of him outside the chambers, and only once did it ever result in punches being thrown. One night, during his first session in Albany, as assembly members gathered after a long day of policy crafting at a local tavern, a member, who also happened to be a candidate for Speaker of the House, made an off comment about Roosevelt's appearance. It should be noted that TR dressed extraordinarily well throughout his life. Stories tell that he would dress in a full suit to dinners every night, even at his own house. The man, J.J. Costello, would soon come to regret the hurtful words, because as soon as the Roosevelt heard the insult, he walked up to Costello and punched him hard enough for Costello to hit the floor. Each time Costello attempted to stand, Roosevelt gave him another wallop. Costello had no fourth attempt and remained on the floor. Roosevelt announced to the shocked crowd, "When you are in the presence of gentlemen, conduct yourself like a gentleman." Edit 2. Thanks for all of the interest. Here's another. Back in the 1900s, there were no formal press meetings with the White House. TR thought it was important for transparency so he set a daily informal press meeting. At noon, he would be shaved, and the barber would lather his neck as the reporters would ask him questions. Often, TR would get worked up over a question and would bound out of the barber's chair and give the barber a smile, knowing the barber is working with a razor. The barber also happened to be the Secretary of War. Theodore was appointed the Assistant Secretary of the Navy under John Long, the Secretary of the Navy. Now TR loved everything related to the Navy. In fact, he wrote a best-selling book at the age of 23 called The Naval War of 1812. It was used the next century as the definitive history on the subject. Anyway, John Long has no interest in being the secretary and generally let TR run the show. TR anticipated a war with Spain and urged President McKinley to move the Pacific Fleet to battle position, but McKinley didn't want war and left the decision up to Long. Long happened to be on vacation that week, meaning TR was in charge. Without the consent of the president, TR gave the order to Admiral George Dewey to move the Navy and prepare for war. Not long after, we ended up going to war with Spain, and the US Pacific Fleet was ready at a moment's notice. They decimated the Spanish Armada in the Battle of Manila Bay, and it was actually one of the most decisive naval battles of all of history. Actually, only one US sailor died, and it was because of a heart attack. The country didn't know the outcome, and President held his breath waiting for the news. A telegram came that said entire Spanish fleet sunk, not one US ship destroyed. Admiral Dewey, on return, was awarded the rank of Admiral of the Navy, which is the equivalent of a 6-star admiral. He's the only one ever to receive the rank, which puts Dewey third in line of military seniority in the country. This was important, because at the time, pre-1900, the US had the 5th most powerful navy, behind Spain. Years later, when TR came to be the president, he made sure to invest in the US Navy, and by the time he was out, it was ranked 2nd most powerful, only behind Britain. Upon hearing this, TR, who pretty much saved the day, resigned from his post as the assistant secretary and enlisted in the army. He was offered a command of a unit, but TR declined, saying that he lacked the necessary field experience, meaning he signed up for frontline duty after being the Secretary of the Navy. 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis. The #1 finisher drove most of the race. He started the race, got tired and heat exhausted and wanted to drop out. He got in a car to DQ himself and head back to the stadium, but along the way, realized he was near the finish line and got out to claim the glory. The #2 finisher was carried across the finish line by his trainers. On a bogus pseudoscience theory, the trainers had been giving him a mixture of brandy, egg whites, and rat poison instead of water. When it came out that the #1 finisher had driven most of the course, this guy was given the gold despite the help from his trainers to finish. For some reason, the #3 finisher was just a regular guy who did nothing unusual. In this case, ordinary was extraordinary. The #4 finisher was a Cuban mailman who had raised the money to attend the Olympics by running around his entire country and asking for donations. When he landed in New Orleans, he lost all the money gambling. He managed to scrounge enough to get to St. Louis and attend the Olympics. However, he had no money for athletic gear, so he ran in dress shoes and pants hacked off at the knee by a fellow racer who happened to have a knife. He probably would have come in first had it not been for the hour-long nap he took on the side of the road. After eating rotten apples he found at an orchard near the course. The #9 and #12 finishers were from South Africa and ran barefoot. South Africa didn't actually send a delegation. These were students who just happened to be in town and thought it sounded fun. #9 was chased a mile off course by angry dogs. Half the participants had never raced competitively before. Some died. St. Louis only had one water stop on the entire run. This, coupled with the dusty road, and exacerbated by the cars kicking up dust, lead to several fatalities. The Russian delegation arrived a week late because they were still using the Julian calendar until 1918, while effectively the rest of the world had switched to the Gregorian calendar. Credit to you/Draken_Perothean for this synopsis, which I have shamelessly stolen and tweaked just a little for clarity and brevity.